Okay, so we are going to jump into our expressive mark making exercise here, and I'm going to be working from that same photograph that I used in Module 5. So you're going to see that same image come up again, but remember that the object here is, and one of the reasons I want you to use an image you've already done before, is I want you to have an understanding already of where those darks and lights go, of what kind of colors you need to mix. I don't want it to be a color exercise where you're worrying about colors and you're overthinking that aspect of it. So I'm going to very quickly block in. Notice I've divided the panel into fourths. You can use a smaller panel if you want to. I think it's a little easier. I know a number of people use really small panels when they teach an exercise like this. I like using a little bit larger one so you've got a little bit more place to go. So, getting those lights in and then quickly blocking in darks. Remember, the idea is to go for 10 minutes exactly. And so we've started about 30 seconds ago. So I'm going to try to extremely quickly blot these in. Remember, I want to keep the no tan thin, the darks thin, and the lights thicker. So I'm going to go back and scrape that back. That also adds to the surface. Do the same thing here. So it's very thin. Then the lights, like the sky, are going to be thicker. So I can blot those in. And for this exercise, keep in mind we're not trying to make a finished painting. We are trying to capture more expressive marks. So if you end up with some shape patterns in the sky like I'm developing here that look interesting, go with them. Don't get rid of them. You don't want to eliminate stuff that happens by accident that works out really nicely for you. So if you end up with something that looks like clouds and your photograph had a sunny day, don't worry about that. That's part of the expressive process and part of the artistic process. So I'm going to go through a lot of paper towels today. So I hope you've got plenty out, whether you're working with a brush or with a knife. And then I'm going to reach over here and get a little bit lighter blue so that there's some modulation in there. And keep in mind we're working fast. So the faster you can execute that, the better. And one of the things that happens when you're working super fast like that, you end up with more interesting marks. And 9 times out of 10, they're not the intentional ones. You know, it's the stuff that happens accidentally. Like that edge right in there, like the shape of that cloud that I like so much. So let that accidental stuff happen. If you can get it done in, got purple in there. If that happens, just wipe it off. Remember, again, it's an exercise, not a finished product. Everything is fixable. So I'm going to make a much lighter area up here and then drag it down into here. And notice that as I go lighter, I'm letting those light colors stay thick. And I'm changing direction often. So this one is going to end up being way more about sky than land. If you pick up some purple, do not worry about it, just keep going. You can come back and fix things later by going over and tweaking, but the idea here is to increase your speed, to get faster. So I'm going to have some soft edges in this. So it looks like these are cloud shapes that are sitting down towards the land. I'm even going to let some of this purple that pulls up in here become part of a taller tree. And use it. Use it. Don't worry about that part. Remember, then we have the light of the landscape. So I'm going to go in and blot that in real quickly because I'm trying to move super fast. I'm going to put that in fairly quickly across here. A little bit darker down towards the foreground so that there's some depth. Not worry about it super much if it catches some of that purple, because it'll add to the texture and the surface that's on there. It'll help make a transition from that foreground to that background area. This is especially useful if you're working plein air, so that you can make sure you can get that whole feeling. Remember, there was a light area right in here. I'm just going to give myself an idea of where that was, and then go in with really light, much lighter. Remember, thicker for the lighter part, much lighter yellow. Then I had a little bit of a gray over here for the road that goes back. And think about right in there, carving some out. Even use a knife here to carve out a little bit. And then pull some in. Keep it soft. And we've got about 3 minutes left, so I'm going to take some of the darker gray, more neutral, and go down here in the land below. Where that ditch area is. These are all the same colors I used in the original painting, but notice how different they are. Then I want to get some of that green into the distance, that dark green that was in the distance. And imply some light falling on those surfaces. So get some lighter areas over here. To add that in, I'm going to need that smaller knife and go boom, boom. I'm going to imply that those are taller trees right there. So basically I'm using that photograph as a jumping off point, not as a final stage. Break up that edge some. Getting a little dry paint going on here. Different painting days. I'm Okay, so it's a study. Keep in mind, it's a study. We're not trying to produce the final paintings. That's the first one, 10 minutes. Then, I'm going to think about what I liked about that, what I didn't like, what I'd like to hold on to, and what I'd like to let go of. So in the next one, I might want to de-emphasize the sky and emphasize the land a little bit more. So I'm going to take that tiny little bit of purple. Keep it super thin. And then I'm going to go to sky. Give it a little bit of difference from left to right. So I'm going to alter the values that I've used a little bit in the first one. I'm going to make the surface of it a little smoother. That first one had more clouds going on, so it got fairly rough. I'm going to pull some clouds in at the very end, but I want to lay this sky in a way that it's pretty blended and only implies maybe some distant clouds. Really distant. Not super thick and not super hard. So down here, I'm going to begin to imply that it's lighter on that edge. I'm going to actually get some white in there. Make it, because I've already got some blue on my knife, that's just going to blend in and it just saves me a little bit of time. So I'm not mixing anything new, I'm using what's already on the knife. If it gets a little purple, it's okay. Now I'm letting it go a little thicker by applying less pressure so that I'm building up something that's coming closer and is a little bit more cloud-like on this right-hand side of the composition. So I'm letting that light be thicker. And remember, on the horizon line, that's further away, so it's going to be lighter and less thick. Now to imply clouds, like I showed you in that image in the concept module, I'm going to use this knife, put some thicker paint on there, And I'm going to create some implied contrails going the other direction. So make the mark's direction imply movement. And it'll make a more interesting surface than if you paint it fairly flatly. Now to go for the land on this one, I'm going to go with a more neutral, a little bit more yellow ochre color. And just barely apply it. See if I put it on thinly. Here at the horizon. There's a little bit of dried paint in there, and it's giving me a mark that I kind of like. So I'm going to let it stay. I'm going to go with it because it scraped its back. It's one of those happy accidents, and it's giving me an edge I kind of like. Just pulled in a little bit of the paint, just helping to blend along there. I can spread it thinly. So I'm going to have it change color as it gets down towards the horizon, towards the ditch at the bottom. But I'm going to need to add some more paint to my knife before I do that lower section. Okay, there I've gone counterintuitive. I made the light transparent. It's because I'm going to put more paint on top of it. So I can take some dark and I can go into a little bit darker value, brown. I can go into this, and now I have an opaque next to a transparent. I can pull some of that purple off so it becomes a little bit more transparent again, and it'll read as being a little further back. For the distant trees, I am going to imply the lighter sections with a little bit of that lavender color that I had mixed up. So the sections that are being hit by light, I'm going to go in with some of that and sit in front of the darker purple that's behind them. I can take the knife, I can go back into this, I can alter that edge. Think about playing with the edges a little bit. So soften some, make others harder. And I can go back and forth, call that dancing. I think we have a hawk. Hear the screaming of the birds. And go back and forth there and make that softer through the addition of some white above. That's carving back in. Going back and forth like that keeps the edge loose, whether you're working with a knife or with a brush. So then I'm going to go over here and strengthen that section that's a little in front of it. And I can lighten it up even more with a lighter value of that gray. Where it might be turning and catching a little bit of light. For that foreground, I'm going to Begin to play with breaking that mass up a little bit. Got a more neutral color here that's gonna pull that foreground a little closer. Break up that space a little bit more. Let some of those breaks in there show through. Then I can go back with my kind of brownie color, pull some edges up with the rougher surface, make it look like it's in the front. I'm getting a covered knife here. And the breeze is taking away all my paper towels. So where I want to put the light, I am going to go back with that super intense yellow. I'm going to add it as a thin line that is thick so that it will come forward some. I'll put some more of it on here and make the lines get a little bigger. As they get towards the foreground. And as that surface moves away, you can even go back in and add a little bit of that muted color. I can play with that background a little bit more. And begin to unify that a little bit more than it is so far. Okay, you can see how I'm starting to build up a surface there, and it's got thick to thin, light to dark, got a variety of edges, and a variety of different kinds of marks. So there are 2 different variations on a theme. Again, they're just sketches and studies. We're not trying to finish them off, so I don't want you to spend more than 10 minutes on them. But get your panel out, get started, and let it go. Just experiment and don't be too judgmental with yourself about what happens. And you can always do more. I'd recommend doing at least 4, but more is better. So post them when you're done. Let us know how they turn out.